still got it on their calendar. You can put it on your calendar if you want.
I'm going to go ahead and send you a meeting maker. Good morning, everyone. Sorry to interrupt. We're going to go ahead and I'll send that out right now. So the way that morning's going to work for Friday, we'll start the 8 to 10 session with Jim. Rob's going to come in from, oops, I need to adjust that too, because that runs into your launch celebrations / lunch. Go ahead and stop your share, please.
Stop my share, okay.
There you go. So we're just kind of working those things out. The town hall itself, because we are in training, we have made the decision. We're just going to go ahead and complete the training. We will ask you and send you some invites to watch the town hall replay, which is always available in Connect, but I'll make sure you have a direct link to it so we don't have to go all over hill and dale to find it. I know this is a real sudden ask. I'd like to thank you in advance for your flexibility on that. Just send me or Jim a message and we'll work that out with you. But we kind of have to do it this way to make sure that it falls into line starting your 90 days and going that with it. Does that make sense to everyone?
You saying 8 a.m. Eastern?
No, sir. 8 a.m. Central, 9 for you.
Oh, okay. I was just getting that right.
Yeah. You can sleep an extra hour.
Oh, no. I'm up early with the rest of the guys on my other team, so no worries.
All right. Okay, so what is our day going to look like today? Are we done here? You got anything else to say?
Housekeeping's good, so when you're ready to roll.
Okay, so we're going to talk about communications today. And I'm going to talk about some general concepts of communications. I want to do it with an absolutely clean slate. I don't want to get into any of our processes any more than we already have until we talk about the importance of communications. And communication is not just what you ask and the kind of questions you ask from a scripting standpoint or from a sequencing cadence standpoint, but it's really also the manner in which you deliver your communications and receive those communications from the person you're interacting with. So we're going to talk about some fundamentals. A lot of this stuff will not be new to you, but I want to kind of at least put it in perspective from our standpoint as to what we expect from you, how we will be asking you to communicate, think about the things that are important, talk about the various aspects as we sort of introduced yesterday about the importance of your tonality, importance of your words, the importance of your body language, the challenges we have in this COVID world right now, such as we are experiencing right now, and that is we're doing a lot of stuff virtual that we would normally otherwise do as face-to-face, and that has becoming less and less. I expect it to be that way for a while to come, so I want to make sure that we're practicing the best communication skills we possibly can, thinking of them maybe extra hard to make sure that we at least are encouraging by our own example good communication skills as we interact with people in this kind of a virtual world. We started last sort of as almost before COVID hit us, we were talking about communication skills and communication techniques, and then COVID hit us, and this became all of a sudden very, very important. And I had just finished a presentation on communication skills as COVID began to rear its ugly head and take hold. So I'm going to go through that little session. It's a communication 101. I told you yesterday you probably had your fill of 101s last week with business and this and that and service delivery and all the other kind of things. 101 foundation material, pure and simple things you probably have heard, know about, but I just want to put it together in a way that we all agree and are working off the same page. So I'm going to go ahead and start that presentation up, make sure that you guys can see it, and get you started on this thing, and we'll get going. Everybody see the interpersonal communication slide set? Get rid of that so I get to my screen. Anybody see that? Everybody see the interpersonal communication slide?
Yep. I can see it.
Yes, good. Thank you, Bill.
We can see it.
Yep.
All right, great. Good to go. So we're going to start down this road here about good, solid communications. I want to start with the definition of what it is. and we'll work through it, and we'll talk about some examples, and I may ask you to kind of participate with me in a little role play here and there just to make sure we've gotten the concept out there the way we want. So I'm going to start off again like we did yesterday. I'm kind of ask you the question. Think about three things, and I'll give you about 2 minutes to think about three things that you think are important to you when you're communicating with someone else. And these will be attributes of the communication process itself, not the subject matter, but how you talk, how you speak, what your body language might look like. What do you think are the most important things that you would want to project when you're communicating with someone else? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes on the clock to do that, and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead.
It's not just listening, but understanding what they're talking about. And you can show that you're understanding and you're engaged or involved in conversation by providing feedback or asking questions or mirroring it back to them.
I was going to ask you how do you see understanding, and you nailed it right there. So that good feedback, and we'll talk about those feedback techniques here in just a second. All right, Stanley, how about you? Are you on mute?
Unmute would help.
Okay.
That's part of communication. Yeah. So
communication. That's a mute button, right?
yeah, I had eye contact, and I also had listening, because communication is a two-way street. It's not called communication unless you're listening and can respond to the other person. But the other thing I thought of too, which is always visual, whether you're there in person or not, is your dress and grooming. That would set the tone of the attention of the person you're talking to. If you're not professionally dressed, depending on the client, they're not going to hear what you're saying, because they're like, why did that guy wear that? Or why is he not dressed a certain way? So I think your dress and grooming is a key part of your communication with your client, customer, or anybody.
Good. I agree. That's very good. Thank you, sir. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I went a little bit more in the traditional of what we talked about yesterday, which may not be exactly where you were headed, with body language and,
Yep.
and tone, those types of things. So I kind of went more back to that direction of things. But I agree. Jerome mentioned a lot of really good things with eye contact and listening, those types of things.
All right. I think you guys are tracking pretty well on this. Tan, how about yourself?
I think it's all covered. The only thing I just like to emphasize is body language and listening.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think you guys are in a good place. You got a good sense of what is important to you. Flip that around and recognize that's important to the other person as well. The nice thing about knowing what good communication is, it kind of puts you in control, because you can direct, you can show, you can demonstrate how well you're listening. You certainly can control how well you're speaking and enunciating as you go through the process. And typically what's going to happen, you're setting the stage, you're kind of being the thermometer here, the thermostat. You're setting the temperature, you're setting the stage, you're setting the basis for the communication. And typically people will follow that. So it's really important for you to be constantly thinking of what the good communication skills are, practicing in them, and hopefully letting some of those rub off to the other person. And that does nothing but continue to improve the communication process. So going back to what we talked about a little bit yesterday, I will go through the words we say. And I want to make a difference between the words we say and how we say it. You've all been through the emphasis exercise. What my significant other told me last night is she's having challenge. We all are having challenge getting haircuts. So we're talking about hairstyling, and you could have two reactions to the simple sentence of, "Oh, who is your hairstylist?" You could have an emphasis that would, hey, oh, who is your hairstylist? What does that convey to you? How does my tonality convey in terms of what that person is thinking?
Wasn't real positive. Yeah, it wasn't real positive. Had a little skeptical, like, concern in the tone.
Yeah, you'll know if it was the wrong one because the person will say, "What do you mean by that?" So you know it didn't come across the way you wanted it if you were trying to be positive.
Well, if you add a little bit more emphasis to it, you could say, oh, who is your hairstylist?
Exactly.
What is that? What does that come across as?
I like your style. I like it. It
And
looks good.
this displays a certain degree of positiveness, enthusiasm that carries through. Same words, it's just how I said them. And then I could go the other extreme and says, oh, who is your hairstylist? What does that convey?
Bad haircut.
Bad hair day for sure. So we could go through example. I think you get it. The words you say are one thing. How you say them, the tonality is another thing. We call that paraverbal. So think about in terms of what you're, and maybe you want to say, who installed that server for you? You could also take that as a who installed that server, as if it were like, well, what were you thinking? So again, just in the simple technology world, how you say something as simple as that can be construed in very many ways as based on how you say it. So really important we keep that in mind and think about it. There's another aspect of that too, is that we talked yesterday that only 7% of what we say really gets heard in terms of the words. And it's that tonality piece that gets the other side of it. And really the tonality conveys more than the words themselves, as you could kind of see in that little exercise we just did. So it's really important that 38%, realizing that 45% is still less than half of our communication is based on what we say. And then we got to introduce all sorts of things to that. There could be language differences, there could be location differences, there could be dialects, cultural, all sorts of things can infuse the words we use, the words we say. So it's just really, really careful that you be constantly conscious of what it is that you're relating. If we look at the real aspect of it is body language. Now, I don't know what that picture up there in the right-hand corner conveys to you. It does convey, I don't need words for that. That is really the one thing. I said there is a genuine connection here of some sort. I don't know what it is they're saying to each other, but I can see that there's a strong connection. That I'm not asking you to be like this in front of a customer or client, but your body language. And I think, Stan, you talked about the grooming and the appearance of who you are represents who you are. That's a really interesting point. One of the things that we really want to be conscious of is that who are we going to see and who is going to be there. You've got a polo shirt on, Stan. I can see that from here. And I walk into a group of engineers who've got their pocket protectors, if you remember what those are, and polo shirts don't have pockets. Would I be out of place or not? Maybe a little bit. So oftentimes we have to be sensitive to the dress codes, to the cultural style, the workplace style of the people we are meeting with. Many times if you're going into a manufacturing company, you might find a lot of literally blue-collar workers there. They might be dressed in denims and might have, like I say, a pocket protector with some pins and whatever in their pocket. And you show up in a coat and tie, which is perfectly appropriate, by the way. I've used the opportunity from time to time. If I walked into that environment, I tend to overdress. I will simply say, hey, man, is it okay if I loosen my tie? Or I'm going to take off my coat. I'm going to put it around my chair. Maybe I don't even ask. I just kind of do that, recognizing that it puts me in a more similar place than they are, that they are, and try to become more in their cultural style. So little things like that can go a long way in impacting your communication and your acceptance. There's one phrase I love to use a lot is always strive to make your prospect or the person you're communicating with or talking with feel more comfortable than you are. Get them into you get into their comfort zone. Don't expect them to get into yours. That's a very strong tenet of communication. I think if you follow it, crossing your legs, folding your arms, sometimes is a defensive feel. But if people are sitting back and they're got their legs crossed and they're kind of leaning in a little bit, maybe have their hands clasped like this in front of them, that is a signal for you to say that it looks like they're getting more at ease. Maybe I could lean in a little bit and not obviously just make the mimic of crossing my legs, but maybe I kind of just move my chair up a little bit and I move into the conversation a little more. Taking cues like that and just reflecting their mannerisms in a subtle way. This is not like the French pantomime standing in front of the mirror with a white painted face doing this and the guy on the other side doing the same thing. This is just getting into the feeling and the style of that person and the way they handle their communication is always a safe place to go. There's another part of it that I want to talk about too is how is our brain made up? And we have really three parts to the way we think or the way we react to things. This is the reptilian, that base function, the stem part of our brain is that reactive part. Keeps our heart beating, it keeps everything moving, keeps all the systems going. You don't have to make a conscious effort to do it; it just happens. It's called that reptilian style. Every instinctive animal has that. Then we get that reflexive, reactive. What do I do? Fear oftentimes invokes what? What do you do when you encounter fear? What are the three things you do? Actually, there's two things, and I heard the other day, not just a couple months ago, there's actually a third thing involved in here. Everybody remember the fight?
Fight or flight? Yeah.
There's a third one. Anybody remember what the third one is, or everybody heard of what the third one might be? It's called freeze. So oftentimes people will just either run like hell, stand up and fight and give it everything they can, or they just freeze. And that is that limbic brain, mammalian reflexive action that's taking hold there. And we have a lot of that. That's kind of the truth part of our brain. We react in a true way where we are afraid. We are going to fight. We're going to freeze because we don't know what else to do. It's the neocortex part of our brain that gets us in trouble. And this is what distinguishes the human species from everything else, is that we think, which is sometimes a dangerous thing. So that cortex, that thinking, reasoning side of things is where we also have to base our communication skills from. We got to reason, we got to analyze, we got to figure things out sometimes. And that is that neocortex thinking, reasoning part of our brain at work here. And that's an important part to know about. It's an important part to consider. We need to understand why the tonality reacts differently. You react differently to different tonality. It's your thinking brain coming into play here. You're analyzing, well, this guy angry at me? Why? What did I do? And all of a sudden things start going and then things start turning. Again, your paraverbal communications have that tonality, that emphasis, that pace, the rhythm, the volume, how you pronounce things, how you enunciate. All of these are the real the aspects of the paraverbal communications. The nonverbal communications, that body language piece, which is really key, can consist of several things. Typically, we look at 5 ways you can see or view or visualize people's emotions. Eye contact, you guys all said it, I think, in terms of that's a real important aspect of it. Your eyes are wandering, you're looking up into the corner of the room, you're looking at your watch, or you're looking at things that are not necessarily related to just getting and capturing an eye contact with that person. That's really, really important. Facial expression, that same thing. If you're grimacing, or if your eyes go way up, or if you're looking at awe, or you're just looking like, what? What are you saying there? Cocking your head and just looking at, just having that weird facial expression can also convey positive or negative aspects of the communication. How you postured, I really believe that leaning into a conversation, holding your eye contact as you do that, not leaning back, not folding your arms, crossing your legs can be defensive. as well. So just be cognizant that people do look at your body language. It is an important aspect of communication, and you just need to be familiar with that, comfortable with that. I see Bill up there with his skeptical look right now. He's sitting there, I'm not sure all this applies to me, but you got the sense of how people might read different gestures and different body positions. I just want you to make sure that you think of them, okay? Gestures, pointing, waving your hands. Italians, right, are really great at, and Hispanic cultures are really great at using their hands and their bodies as a way to emphasize and amplify their emotions. Be aware of that. I'm not asking you to do that, but you must be sensitive to what they may or may not mean. Proximity can be a good thing or bad thing. You don't want to be standoffish, but you don't want to be creepy either. So you just got to be real careful about how close you get, how much you are in somebody's space. Some people don't like you being face to face with them. It's more intimidating than it is reassuring, especially with today's COVID situation. 6 feet is kind of the norm now, not a half a foot. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining that socially correct distance. It used to be that just, get within a foot of me, it kind of makes me nervous. Today it's because all the doctors and medical authorities are saying 6 feet's the minimum, and now we've kind of ingrained that into our own behavior, is that 6 feet is really the acceptable norm of proximity these days. So again, be aware of it, practice it, be sensitive to what that not nonverbal piece can be, because it is the biggest part of the communication process. Ways to interpret, you can get some simple examples here. Shaking your head, certainly no. You're sitting there watching somebody shake their head like that, they're not agreeing with you at all. So you need to figure out, well, what's my mid-course correction here? If they're positively, hey, yep, I get it, I understand it, then you're in a good place. And so they're just the head motion, watching their eyebrows, looking at their facial expression in conjunction with that. The shrugged shoulders or raised eyebrow may be doubt, may be really, may be that there's, I don't believe what you're saying. Nervousness, or I'm just getting impatient, moving on. Tapping the fingers, a very, very good sign of somebody being impatient. Again, crossing the arms, looking around the room, kind of doing like this. I'm just kind of waiting for the next piece of this conversation to go. And that goes for the same goes for that crossed legs or folded arm defensive attitude or position that will indicate that there's something's wrong. You got to make a change in the way you're doing things. Smiles always work. And if they're smiling at you, hopefully they're not laughing at you, that you're in a good place. So just recognize that smile, and a good smile from you puts them in a good place. So keep those in mind as you're going through your communications.
Wait for the break, beta.
So what other aspects of communication that, just from your experience, have you seen?
Yes, you can have it, yeah.
That are either positive or negative in interpretation in your mind, based on gestures you've observed and when you're talking to other people? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, for me, we went through an interview process at my former employer. I talked to one of the other guys too, and it was even worse with him, where the VP came in, sat down to do an interview, and spent most of his time either on his phone or laptop, and he wasn't taking notes about the interview. And so he was answering text messages. And emails.
That was a sign of distraction, which interpret as what?
Well, neither one of us got the job, let's put it that way.
Well, the distraction is that I'm either boring this person to death, or they've got some really, really busy things ahead of them that they're trying to accommodate and multitask to handle. So I think in those kind of situations, is say, hey, it sounds like you may have something important coming up there. It would be better if we talk later. That's a very polite thing to say. There's nothing wrong with that. And it might just kind of jolt them into, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be doing this. Let's finish. I didn't mean to get off track here. Or it says, yeah, you know what? We've got a real urgent situation going on here, and I'm trying to keep on top of it. Maybe it would be better for us to talk later. And fine, that's great. no harm done here. Just make sure that I'm recognizing your needs and that you're not being pulled away for things that that I'm not sensitive to. If you need to go do that, then let's do it. So those are kind of other gestures you can watch for. Anybody else? Stan, Tan?
Looking at their watch.
Your watch? Checking your watch?
Looking at their watch. Yeah,
Gosh.
Yeah,
How many
that's like,
times have I been through that? That's why I don't wear a watch anymore. So, I'm not tempted.
well,
Yeah.
the nice way to diffuse that, usually sometimes it's not the fact that they're, trying to get out of something, but they recognize that, you said you're going to be 20 minutes and you have 3 minutes left. So just bring that up. I agreed to 20 minutes. I see we only have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap this thing up. So now they can stop looking at the watch because they were trying to figure out, is this guy going to wrap up or not? And while they're thinking that, they're not listening. So you kind of interject and say, I recognize that, we have 3 minutes left and we're going to wrap this thing up quickly.
Good. And you can also you can play it another way too. Sometimes the conversation gets long because the other party is genuinely interested and gets into some questioning tracks that are tangential to this, but important to pursue. And I'll use my watch at that point in time sometimes. Say, look, we set aside 20 minutes for this, and obviously we're going over here. We can continue for another 10, 15 minutes if that's okay with you, or we could stop here and pick it up later. Which do you prefer? So acknowledging, as you said, Stan, acknowledging the fact that we are running into time constraints that he and you had agreed to is important for you to stop and say, get permission either to move on or to agree to let's reschedule this and continue because it is important enough to chase down to the end. But if you acknowledge it, it really takes the pressure off and the anxiety out of the meeting. This guy worried about coming up on his time limit, and you're the one that brings that to his attention, his or her attention. That just helps you in your credibility and your rapport with that person a lot. Any other thoughts? Any other experiences you've had that you'd like to share as it relates to how people in their body language can project negative or positive feelings and how to handle them?
So how the communication has changed in the last 15, 20 years?
How has it? Well, I think we've got a lot more distractions that we have to deal with. We've got a lot more modes of communication. We've got cell phones. We've got PCs. We've got everything imaginable that there's interrupting or trying to vie for our attention. We're going to talk a little bit later that the communications of the 50s, for example, didn't rely upon anything, didn't have mobile phones. Very few people had any kind of a device that should, be what I consider a video kind of a interaction device. So none of that was really familiar to us. We had telephone communication and we had face-to-face communication. Today, not only have you got multiple modal communication environment, but they're constantly being altered by things like COVID. This pandemic has made don't even look at the last 20 years, look at the last 6 months and how things have changed. Radical changes. And I suspect that we're going to get more and more into that, gaming and everything else that's coming into entertainment, streamed entertainment, how we communicate, how we get entertained, how we touch the outside world, how we are touched by the outside world is changing a lot. Does that make sense? I mean, you guys see that as well?
Yeah, and for sure. And I'm also seeing with the newer kids, I think most of us here in the room are 30 plus, but with the newer kids like 20, 25, seems like multitasking is the norm. And even the younger kids may not be willing to offend you, but sometimes you will see them not paying you full attention, but they say, oh, they're still listening to you. And I don't know, sometimes it can be awkward, when you know they're not listening to you, they're not paying attention.
Yeah. It's harder to keep someone's attention when you're not there in a full face-to-face mode. It's hard for you not to be doing something on the computer, or it's probably more easier for you to, check your messages like I just did to get my phone to shut up. Start looking at my phone, tapping on it, responding to quick text messages, et cetera, while I'm trying to communicate with you. Your temptations, and you're in a multimodal world, become greater and greater to be multitasking, and that just degrades and detracts from the communication that you're trying to achieve. So it's really, you'll hear me say a lot, don't ever, what was the name of the gremlin? Was it the gremlins? Don't ever feed them after midnight.
Yeah, don't get them wet, don't feed them after midnight.
Yeah, don't feed them after midnight. I take that and I say, don't ever send a proposal by email. Because if you present your proposal and you can't do it face to face, and there are extreme examples, and maybe not so extreme, but sometimes you're dealing with the government where you have to turn them into a committee and they have to be an RFP driven process, and you just can't control it. But in a regular day-to-day business to business kind of a world, you don't ever want to just hand someone your proposal electronically and tell them, call me if you have any questions. Because you will lose a lot in the presentation of that proposal. We're not going to present it on Thursday, Friday, what we produce, but we are going to present it the next week. We're going to have to sit down and say, all right, we got the way we want it, we agree to it as a team. How do we present this in a way that's going to be most effective to the audience we're presenting to, which is our prospective buyer? So there are some cardinal rules that I'll throw out there. You may or may not agree with them. I'm not asking you to, but just based on our experience, it is not a good idea to have a proposal sent electronically unless there's a really, really good reason for it. Okay, good. Any questions about some of the styles of communication? I want to kind of just jump into communication barriers, what to expect. We kind of touched on a few already. There are a lot of walls that come up in communications that we are not necessarily because someone's bored or because they're angry or because of whatever it is. It's just the natural cultural makeup of our world. Even in our local communities, our diversity has expanded exponentially. And across an international world, of course, it's always been a challenge. In the communication world, you've got not just a language barrier to deal with. I've had classes, taught classes here at CMIT where everybody in the room, English was a second language. Now, I used to, by the way, my ex-wife was English. I used to encourage her to start thinking about taking English as a second language here in America, because I couldn't understand half what she was saying sometimes because of her English brogue and dialect. But in the real world, we are dealing with a very diverse community here locally, as well as throughout the country, as well as throughout the world. So we have different language. We have the first language. We have the dialect barriers we need to be sensitive to. Cultural, our lifestyles, where we live, what we do, some of our ethnic and our religious backgrounds are all factors in how we behave and how we communicate and how we talk to people. And we must be either recognizing those of others as well as those of our own, and how to filter those in a way that don't come across in the wrong interpretation. Very difficult challenge. Location, time zones. At the end of the day, Robin D'Souza, who is one of our techs, is in Mumbai. And he joins our, what time is it in Mumbai? 11 o'clock in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's something like 3 o'clock in the morning for Robin. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine being at the tip of my game at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm talking to Rob and team here as a part of our executive staff. But he joins us at 3 o'clock his time every week to do our weekly staff meeting. That is going to impact the effectiveness and the style of communication in ways that we perhaps are not sensitive to. And then you couple that with it's a phone call, it's not a face-to-face, not even a Zoom. It can add to a lot of what I call the barriers to communications. They're plentiful. My observation is that sometimes we don't recognize them, and we take them for granted. And I urge you not to. Just be real sensitive to that. Some of the what I call the tenets of engaging in conversations include making sure that you're listening. We heard that word in the beginning of our presentation today, is listening. Active listening is the term I use. Your body language shows you're listening, you're leaning in, you're leaning forward, your eye contact will show and tell that you're engaged. But the other part of your verbal side of listening is asking questions of clarification, agreeing, acknowledging. Yep, I think that's an important point, is a good example of acknowledging. Looking for more interpretation. Can you tell me more about when that server was installed? Have you had problems with it before now? If so, what kind were they? And you can get into a dialogue with someone by just the nature of your asking what I call Socratic or cascading questions will show that you're listening and responding with a question of clarification or of acknowledgement or of agreement. So the importance of listening shows strongly. It's a great sign and a great way to engage a person with building rapport, building credibility, building confidence that you are certainly engaged in understanding what I as a person am telling you about what I'm looking for, what I'm looking for as far as a solution to some of the issues I may be experiencing.
Jim, that's why when you were talking about that the other day, it's making sure, I think you mentioned, let them know before the meeting that in order to make sure that you totally understand and can capture their needs, that you're going to take notes while you're talking, so that they don't think that you're just doing something out of turn. They know why you're doing that, and so it doesn't look like you're not paying attention.
Exactly. You're not just there doodling. You're there taking notes, making sure you're capturing the important facts. What you're also doing is you're capturing what they say. Remember, I told you the tenet of good listening is to take down everything they say that's important to recognizing what they're feeling. So if they're saying this, having this server downtime is really crushing the morale of my employees, well, you better put that down in big capital letters with quotes around it, because you're going to use that very quote in describing the current situation when you go back and tell them, this is what we found, this is the current situation, here's what we're going to do to fix it. And the way you're going to describe the current situation, to describe it as much as you can in their words, because they can't dispute that. This is not you making an assumption here. It's just you replaying what they've told you, and that's where you're going to get the impact of what they're experiencing, because now you can create the differential, the gap closure strategy you have. How I'm going to get you from where you are to where I'm going to see you when you're working with us. How we're going to make that difference. So I look at that listening versus talking piece. Some people will use an 80-20 rule. Listen 80% of the time, talk 20%. I'm going to stretch it a little bit. I'm going to say you listen 90% of the time and you talk 10%. And again, it's the way you ask the questions. It's your body language that shows that interest. You ask pertinent questions. You follow that cascading Socratic process. You'll get there. So if it's, don't use this opportunity to describe what a great day you had. And, well, let me tell you about all the experiences I've had trying to deal with antiquated server technology, and start into a soliloquy of what's important to you, rather than listen to what's important to them by asking the questions to explain it further. So keep the conversation focused really on them talking. That's Communications 101. Any feedback, any comment, any questions to get a sense of what we're leading toward? Just be aware of what good communication skills are. If you think about them, you'll do well. If you ignore them, or if you're not aware of them even, it's kind of putting you back in that unconscious, incompetent stage of your learning process, and you're going to be blindly going through a conversation, not understanding why it doesn't seem to be connecting. If you at least become consciously aware that there are communication skills that you can apply every day with every kind of person you interact with, your kids all the way up to your boss, all the way over to your customers, you're going to be great. Any questions I can tackle right now?
Maybe
Good.
just a comment, Jim.
Yes, correct.
And this may be beyond the communications 101, but one thing I did find, with meetings and interactions, you have to take into account the personality of the folks, because you got people that are just really strong and keep interrupting, and so no one else is able to be able to communicate as well. So that kind of disrupts that communication, and no one is able to put in, their feedback, their input as well.
You're absolutely right on, and you're segueing right into my next section.
Okay, sorry.
You got to be aware not only of how people receive and how people project in a communication world, but what is the personality behind that. I think I used the example yesterday, how I would communicate with Joe Biden and how I would communicate with Donald Trump would be very, very different. Would you agree to that?
Oh, yeah.
Not that I want to, in the world of politics, that's exactly correct. We got two radically different styles at play here, both trying to do the same thing, which is get elected, right? So yeah, you're exactly right. And we're going to talk about that in one of these upcoming sessions here about how do you deal with the various styles. Okay, I'm going to take a switch break here. Do we want to take a break now at 5 minutes and then we'll load up the next slide?
You guys okay with the break now? Go a little early?
About 5 minutes, and then I'm going to load up my next section here, and we'll get right on to continue. So you can stay here. I'll be done here in just a matter of a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure you guys get an opportunity to take a break yourself if you'd like.
I've got 48 right now. Let's go back 53. Let's be prompt on